When is a tag not a tag? Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to what should be a Tag Tuesday video, but I just didn't feel like answering all the prompts that go along with the mid-year Booktube Freakout tag, so I thought I would just do a real quick video tell you my top 5 books I've read so far this year. These are in no particular order. I'll order them all when we get to the end of the year, but right now these are my top 5 books. The competition wasn't particularly deep, but it was of really high quality. So the first book I want to mention is one of my top 5 this year, is The Hemmings of Monticello by historian Annette Gordon-Reed. This is a prize-winning work, and it is a monumental work of academic history in which Reed goes back and sifts through letters and documents and goes to places to try to gather as much information as she could about Sally Hemings. So I'm sure most of you are aware that Sally Hemings was an enslaved woman who Jefferson fathered several children with, and Gordon Reed kind of deals with the issue of how consensual this is. My argument has always been that if you're an enslaved woman, you can't say no, and therefore there's no such thing as consensual sex. Reed has, I think, kind of an interesting take on the subject, but this is just a thoroughly researched work of history, and it's not, this kind of schlocky thing about the romance between Jefferson and Hemings. It is as much about the Hemings family and slavery and the situation of slavery in colonial America as is about anything else. And I thought it was excellent. It's not the fastest read in the world, it's not the easiest read in the world, but I thought it was an excellent book. The next book on my list is Piranesi by Susanna Clark, or Susanna Clark, is that her name? Can't remember right off the top of my head if it's Susan or Susanna. This was a novel I think that won the Booker Prize, the Women's Prize last year, year before last, and it was one of those books which, because of all the hype surrounding it, I largely ignored, but I was able to get a digital copy of it from my library app, from the Libby app, and I read it this year, and I have to tell you, I thought it was great. It's one of those books which kind of lives in my head, and I see scenes from it, and I think about it, and it really worked on me. This kind of story about this person who we come to know is Piranesi, who lives in this kind of world in which he's just in this really large mansion house building which floods, and he has to survive, and he tries to piece together and make sense of the world that he lives in. It's really only one other person there who he refers to as the professor, and the book kind of brings us into this world and how Piranesi lives and what he thinks and all his ideas, and then we get kind of back to reality, and Piranesi is kind of brought back, and I really thought it was excellent, and I really just liked it, and I know that some people really loved it and some people didn't like it at all. For me, it definitely worked. The next book I want to mention is Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks. This is still up for the Women's Prize, which I believe will be announced on the 13th, and today is the 11th or the 12th, so the announcement comes up. Fire Rush is a novel about a Jamaican British woman named Umaya and her struggles in the late 70s and the early 80s with racism and sexism and violence and drug use, and it is woven into the story of this immigrant experience in the London suburbs. Music and Jamaican culture and all these other kinds of things are woven in, and I just thought it was really done brilliantly. Now it's set around kind of a thrillerish story, and I have to tell you, I don't think the thrillerish aspects of the story are necessarily the strongest parts of the book, but the character, the rhythm, the language, the dialect, the weaving together of, like I said, aspects of Jamaican culture, as exists, in the suburbs of London at the time, politics, events going on in the world. I really just thought it was a really deep and engrossing book, which was really, really well done. The fourth book on my list is Boulder by Eva Baltasar, translated from Spanish? No, translated from the Catalan by Julie Sanchez. This book is a really short book about a woman who essentially is a quintessential loner. That's where her name comes from, who works as a cook on cargo ships, off the coast of South America. She meets and falls in love with a woman, follows her to Iceland, and their relationship deepens and it becomes all-encompassing, and then the woman decides that she wants to have a baby, and Boulder kind of goes along with it, and it kind of explains, kind of looks at obsession and love and how children change that and how relationships evolve. And I identified a great deal with the main character in Boulder. I'm not nearly as extreme as she is, but there were things about that that really resonated, and I thought the writing, the language was spot on and really perfect and simple and almost poetic in lots of places. And speaking of great writing, the last book on my list, the top 5 books for me so far this year, is Foster by Claire Keegan. You might know that I was a really big fan of Small Things Like These last year by Claire Keegan, and I was able to read Foster, which is a novella-length book, maybe 60 pages, which is just to me, perfection in writing. It's one of those books where the story is emotional and powerful, and the characters are memorable, and the situations are, are again really powerful. But the writing itself, to me, is just brilliant. Just the economy of language, the ability to wring emotion from relatively simple sentences and relatively simple words, and to kind of create this world. Is incredibly powerful. The simple version of the story is that it's a story about a young girl whose parents essentially send her to live with another family who don't have a child, and they literally foster her for a period of time while her mother is pregnant and having another child. And again, I just thought the writing was absolutely perfect and beautiful, and so for that, and for I thought the emotional power and effectiveness of it, I made Foster one of my top 5 books this year so far. There you go. There is my list of my top 5 books this year. Look forward to your comments about any of these books in the comment section down below, and thank you for watching.